Show them. Yeah, turn the lights on. You might have to turn the lights on. The lights on.
Everybody can hear me? Yes?
Yes, ma'am. Snap once.
Slap once? You're not awake? Sorry, I made you close your eyes. So, I want to ask a question. Who know what hierarchy means? One person.
Who what?
Hierarchy.
Hierarchy?
Mm-hmm.
It's a structure in which it's vertically oriented usually,
Okay.
with a almighty boss at the top and it filters down and branch like.
Okay. So I want, for now, just go down to the basics on organizational structure, and I want to show of hands who would like to have their co-op to be hierarchical.
As long as you're the boss.
And in your organization is going to be named Jesus organization. Okay. And who wants to be in an organization that is non-hierarchical?
Is there a third choice?
Me too.
No.
Not allowed.
No business at all.
Okay. So that's good to hear, because it's hard to have a co-op with worker owners that is hierarchical, right?
Horizontal.
It would be hard if it's not horizontal. I feel like it will violate every single thing that co-ops stand for, right? So, but it's some in there that are kind of weird, but it can happen. But it's exciting to hear that everybody feels like that's the way they want to go. So we're gonna move on from that. Like, I think that's a good start. We're gonna have more event stuff future talking about that, but I think that's a good start to know that your organization might have different things that people have to do, and some people know to do some things better. But if you already agree that everybody should have the same rights, I think that's a good beginning. That it's not going to be hierarchical, that it's not going to be somebody with more power. So we're going to go and move a little bit more to talk about how we're going to deal with decision making, because that talks a lot about power. And then after that, you might have a little bit more clear who's going to have certain roles depending on what they involve in, or how they're involved, or what are the knowledge on that. But I'm gonna move to decision making power process. So this thing is not working. My computer is totally asleep. So you close their eyes and never open it. Really listen. Okay.
Oh!
Well, okay. There it is. So nobody wants to be in this, and everybody wants to be kind of something that will look like this.
Don,
There's a
can
lot
I
of-
ask a quick question about this one?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got these little units.
Right?
How do they interact at the intersection? Do they send a representative, or do they all get together?
Well,
So-
I don't really know what is exactly the structure in this one, but for the way I see it, yes, they make certain decisions at one level that just affect those groups, and then they send a representative to either have a representative on the board or decide to send one person to make the bigger decisions.
So it could be a
the
different
one,
person each time going
Right.
to share them.
right. So everybody have a say in either
Okay.
here or here, right? So everybody has to say in here, and then just make the decision and just make a bigger decision. Cool. So I'm gonna move on with decision making, if that's okay. Do you wanna use this or shut it up?
So who here has been part of a group trying to make decisions all together as a group. Everyone's tried to do that with a group of people at some point. Who here has been part of a group that made a decision and you felt like not everyone's voice was heard in that decision? This is something that happens pretty often. Lots of people have devised ways to make systems for how to make decisions in a group so that that kind of thing doesn't happen, and to make certain kinds of decisions come out of groups that wouldn't come out if you didn't have these systems in place. So first what I want to do is a quick brainstorm. What kinds of features does a good decision have? A decision that comes out of a group. So one might be that
Consensus?
so what is
Consensus, in other words, the group, sort of, the majority of the people in the group agree that that's a good decision?
So one, it would be good, it's better for a majority of the people to agree with the decision that's made than for a majority not to agree.
Right.
What other features are there of good decision?
All concerns are heard and as many as possible are addressed.
This is sometimes that you felt like concerns weren't addressed in groups you were part of?
People who aren't speaking are encouraged to speak up, and maybe if you notice somebody being uncomfortable or they seem to not be on board, it's kind of like there's somebody there to get them back on track and encourage them to speak up.
So people aren't derailing conversations, and maybe people that in other kinds of groups their voices don't get heard, they get heard. So decisions are inclusive, right?
Yeah. She's heard.
That's a serious concern.
So there are lots of different. So who are some examples of these kinds of systems that people have put in place? I heard one over here. Consensus. Does anyone know what consensus is?
100% people agrees with the decision. That's consensus.
Majority rules.
My understanding is when a group reaches a decision that everyone can agree to, even if it's not their favorite option, it's something that everyone can agree to with some degree of compromise.
So consensus can mean a lot of different things, I think. But broadly, it means that basically it means that in the decision, anyone that wanted to stop the decision from going forward, that wanted to block it, could have if they wanted to, but didn't. So if that decision went through, it meant that no one had a blocking objection, objection that was so strong as to stop the decision from
As
going.
long as the decision, like, they have like a good reason.
Right.
They can't just like stop it
Right.
because they're being petty or they don't actually
Because
believe
they're
in
FBI.
what the group stuff.
Right. So what are some other examples of decision-making processes that aren't consensus? I'd say majority rules. Absolutely. Majority rules is not consensus.
Or even a minority rules. I mean, look at the Republican Party right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the Tea Party, which is admittedly a minority, is swaying the activities of their fellow Republican congressmen. So that's
So a small elite group of people making decisions for everyone else, that would not be consensus, right?
I got a
We
question.
didn't consent to the government being shut down, but you went ahead anyway. Right.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Say, for example, that the group's mission and values proposal is laid out, but the interpretation of that mission and value
Right.
is how can I say, the interpretation of that it varies from individual to individual, especially depending on culture and ethnicity. Yeah.
Right.
Then, just because one person disagrees
Right.
and they think that it's not in the group's best interest, but maybe their vision or their interpretation of
Right.
is misunderstood or misinterpreted.
Sure.
How would that work out?
Does anyone else want to respond to that?
Still got to be 100% or
So
just
the
continue
question
forward?
was if there are differences, so in consensus, we have a bunch of
Variables, a lot of
information
variables.
here on consensus if you want to learn more about it. But in consensus, if one person has a different interpretation about what the values mean and so comes to a different conclusion about what the right thing is to do, does that mean that the decision can't go through?
Mm.
I know other people in this room have
Exactly.
a lot of experience with consensus.
That's kind of like brought up like at the beginning, like before you start the meeting of a consensus, whenever we're about to make a decision, you come up with a list of like values or like code that you go by,
Right.
and I think there you kind of establish like, is everybody on the same page as far as like what they believe
But
in?
my values and my codes may be different because we come from different societies and we have
But-
different, same thing, but you look at it one way, I look at it another.
I think it would just kind of come up in the beginning though, and it would be like more
Think so?
clear.
Well, I think consensus is about bringing out those discussions where another form of decision making would not have those kinds of discussions take place, where the people that had the majority opinion would just make the decision, and maybe those different kinds of opinions wouldn't even get voiced. Because it's like, well, what's the point if they're just they have the power to just make the decision anyway? It's just one person.
Majority rules, I guess.
So
And that is a good example of where, so there's kind of two kinds of consensus. There's pure consensus, people that say, no matter what, if people are blocking it because they think it goes against the values of the group, no matter their interpretation, then you gotta work out a compromise, right? No matter how many committees or meetings you do, we've dedicated ourselves to pure consensus. We want to get there, right?
But now, I'm
then some
steadfast.
groups do modified consensus,
Oh.
which is where they say, you know what, we don't want to be in meetings till midnight.
Yeah.
We want to be able to say,
Yeah.
we really hear this person's concern, but as a fallback, we have this majority vote system, just in case we get to that kind of place, and we want to still move forward. Some people argue that's not even consensus, but
Yeah.
a lot of groups use that as a modified consensus.
As a backup.
But and in the first one, if someone blocks and it's because of a totally personal thing, it has
Right.
nothing to do with the values of the group, then there's ways of getting around that and saying,
To modify it.
still,
Yeah.
But I think too, like what you're saying, like say a value is like, all right, we value sustainability, and then you realize that like my definition of sustainability and your definition of sustainability are different.
Yeah.
Like we could still, and like you're like blocking my proposal because you're like, that's not sustainability.
That's not what
Then
I
we would be
believe.
like, okay, well how can we incorporate both these definitions?
Mm.
Do they have to be like against each other? Probably not, right? Because we're probably in the, at least in figuring out maybe
Some type of
com-
equilibrium. Yeah.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
might give a little,
Yeah,
you give a
and vice
little, and
versa.
then like, all right,
I
and
can work
that
with that.
it's even better because it's something that we all
Can live
yeah,
with.
can live with
Consciously,
and like can do together.
religiously, and ethnically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the origin of consensus is as like a real spiritual ritual of communication by Quakers in America, right?
Mhm.
That's a lot of the processes of
They got mobsters.
and
and
clarified.
figures.
All right, and there's also like different levels, like different people have blocking, like for example, if you have different classes of membership, maybe people have different levels of say. People can block, or people can make a note. So usually there's the ability to decide, the ability to actually be able to stop a decision or make a decision, the ability to have like commentary on a decision, and then there's just being notified of a decision, right? Like just having the right to know what the decision is. There's lots of different levels of how much power. I'm just going to put in a word for other kinds of decision making besides consensus. Some people think that there are other kinds of decision making. Robert's Rules of Order is a really popular one, used a lot by unions, used a lot by corporations. Started written in 1876 by this military engineer guy.
Is that just majority rules? I never.
It's basically a majority rules or a supermajority. It's a combination of majority and supermajority rules with a lot of rules around process, usually for handling big groups. So a lot of stuff around like seconding motions and what tabling a motion means and what actually constitutes holding the floor. So it's usually great for like big groups that where really strict process is necessary for processing all the different kinds of people that are in.
Right, so it's more of a strategic, it's a structure for running a meeting.
Exactly.
So that it doesn't get out of hand,
Right.
and presumably everyone's heard, but, you know.
I mean, the fact is, if you're in a majority rules group, but the people in the group care about everyone's opinion, then you're going to be functioning a lot like a group that operates by consensus. Just as if you're a group that operates by consensus, but you don't really care about what other people think, you're going to have a few people ramming through their decisions all the time. So it really is more about how the values are lived out, and the processes that you set up are to reflect those values and promote for new members that come in and might be coming from different perspectives around what gets to make meets. So there's Robert's Rules of Order, and that's still very popular. There's also Roberta's Rules of Order, which I haven't read. I hear it's a softer, modernized version of a lot of these things. So I want you guys to break up really quick. We don't have a lot of time, but I want you to get into your co-ops and everyone have this decision-making matrix sheet. This is a tricky activity. I want you guys to check in if it's complete. Do you want to do homework?
Homework.
All right. So I'm just going to challenge. So we got 2 challenges. No. This is like Fight Club. You guys get stuff.
New vocabulary.
Yeah. You all need to pick one fight by the time. Right. So with a competitor, exactly. Ask them a question and then beat them up. I think this is gonna be a good so I know that Ali talked a little bit about different classes of membership, right? So maybe if we say like everyone has to agree, but who is everyone? There are people that donated $10 to your organization once, get to make blocking decisions about your organization. The people that work there, your suppliers get to make decisions, your consumers get to make decisions. These are the different classes of people. So there's 3 examples, which is if you have a board of directors, if you have a membership that's different from the workers. So for example, if people that support your co-op can be members even if they aren't working by paying a certain amount of money and attending meetings, and of course the workers. So maybe if you have different classes of workers, you can add that here and clarify that over here. If you want to add consumers, if you want to add producers, if you want to add different classes of groups. So basically for each one, you're going to write, for example, what's an example of a decision you might make as a group?
What kind of greenhouse do you want to put up?
What kind of greenhouse? Do you want to make a geodesic dome? Do you want to make a square? Do you want to make a skyscraper? There's so many choices. All right, so the workers, so for each one you're going to do decide, input, and notify. So the workers, do you think they would get to decide or have input or be notified of that decision?
Wait, you said the workers should build it?
Yeah, the people, the
Okay.
actual people that are going to work in the greenhouse, the co-op members. What are they going to get to decide? Are they going to have input? Or are they going to be notified?
They should get to
They should get probably get to decide.
hopefully.
Now, the people that are going to build the greenhouse for you, if you're going to contract it out, they should just be notified, right?
Yeah.
They probably shouldn't get to decide. All right. Is there anyone that should get input or shouldn't get to decide?
The neighbors?
Definitely, right? Absolutely. Neighbors,
Yeah.
members of the community,
Skyscraper might fall.
providers. So maybe the people that are contracting out, you can give input as well. Maybe funders, if you guys are getting, right. If you're getting funding, maybe they don't get final say. You don't want them. One of the principles of co-ops is autonomy. So you get to make decisions about your own co-op.
They build greenhouses every day, so
They probably have some input.
might have something
Exactly.
valuable to say.
So for having this was really useful because a lot of times it comes up in co-ops where you're like, wait, do they get to decide that, or we totally forgot to, or someone will ask me, I have the right to be told about this, and you might be like, I didn't think so. Having sheets like this, and this is probably something, parts of this will go in your bylaws or articles of incorporation if you incorporate, and some of them will go in your operations manual.
So think of, especially for bylaws and things, who gets to elect a board?
Right.
Who gets to fire, a member? Those kind of decisions. How do you get, bringing on new people, getting rid of people, calling meetings, defining membership, changing mission statements, those kind of large decisions. It's important to start mapping those out so you can pick the right bylaws that work for you.
So if as a group you can do maybe 5 to 10 hypothetical decisions and fill them in the next time? Does that sound doable to people?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Okay. So other resources in your kit. This sheet looks like this. Is just a little bit more on consensus decision making process. And then this one is more about facilitation. How do you run a consensus meeting? If your group decides to use consensus, how do you facilitate it, right? And Worcester Roots and other people in Worcester have developed this over a long time. No, a lot of people. And we're happy to do workshops with your group if you want more about facilitation, if that's an issue your group is needing some training on. There's also more, there's like, activities and stuff on our website, worcesterroots.org. There's some youth-focused ones. A lot of that's like how to get through a tough consensus decision, including this decision-making path, like if you don't come to consensus the first time, how do you make another proposal and bring it back, those kind of things. Yeah.